And I guess with that, let's hit Meet the Depressed.
Good Sunday morning. In his frenzied first week in office, President Trump is testing the limits of his presidential power, racing to fulfill campaign promises, to reshape the federal government, and to settle scores.
Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken.
On his first night as president, Mr. Trump granting a blanket pardon to virtually all of the roughly 1,500 defendants in the January 6th Capitol attack and commuting the sentences of the remaining 14.
You would agree that it's never acceptable to assault a police officer,
Sure.
right? So then if I can, among those you pardoned, DJ Rodriguez, he drove a stun gun into the neck of a D.C. police officer who was abducted by the mob that day. He later confessed on video to the FBI and pleaded guilty for his crimes. Why does he deserve a pardon?
Well, we'll take a look at everything, but I can say this. Murderers today are not even.
What does that mean? We'll take a look at everything. He's not going to go back and re-examine all the pardons that he gave and possibly imprison people for pardons. Like, you can't. And if you give someone a pardon, you can't like recharge them with the crime. So
right, yeah, you can't.
I don't think he'll
revoke
be
a pardon.
taking a look.
Yeah, I mean, this is just him being, pivoting, obviously, and like, I mean, it is funny that he couldn't anticipate that question was going to be a setup for pointing out his hypocrisy. But as I always like to say, no one cares about Trump's hypocrisy except the people who already hate him.
Charged.
President Trump's decision to pardon all defendants, including violent offenders, opposed by 60% of.
And by the way, so what he did there, let me just rewind this for a second. Hold on.
Murderers today are not even charged.
So again, a pivot. So now he shifts from what he's doing with these pardons to basically, the tough on crime messaging, ironically, and saying, like these woke mayors or woke DAs aren't sending people to jail for murder. So let's focus on that instead. Anyway, good pivot from him.
President Trump's decision to pardon all defendants, including violent offenders, opposed by 60% of Americans. And even his own vice president suggested in the days before the pardons were handed out, violent offenders wouldn't be included.
If you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law.
The president also.
It's just very funny because these same people campaigned against the protests of Black Lives Matter and called out were angry that there wasn't more people arrested for that and for, violence that occurred during those protests. And then, of course, they're giving a pass to people who apparently were guilty of violent acts on January 6th. I will say, though, look, I as progressives, I thought we're not supposed to be big fans of the carceral state.
Right.
So I'm not against giving people pardons. I've heard, I didn't follow this very closely, but I would be confident that there are people who were freed from prison who didn't deserve to be there, who were there simply for trespassing on January 6th, which I don't think should land you in prison for, for this long length of time. So I'm not like, across the board going to be mad at these pardons. But if it is true that indeed people who are violent towards police officers were given these pardons, then that's just very hypocritical from an administration that's like all about law and order, supposedly.
Of course, yeah. And obviously, they didn't even stick to it sounds like Vance didn't even know what the plan was and thought he could be safe in saying that the violent ones wouldn't be pardoned. But whoops.
That's what happens when you're Trump's vice president. Trump will happily contradict you, as what happened to JD Vance on the campaign when he said that Trump. He made comments about Trump signing an abortion ban.
Exactly.
That Trump immediately disclaimed.
Yeah.
Signing executive order.
They need like couple therapy, I think. Like imago therapy. That's when like you repeat the thing that person said back to them. That would be a good way to make sure this doesn't happen anymore.
aimed at shutting down the southern border and ramping up deportations. The first of 1,500 additional troops touching down in El Paso, Texas, to support border security. According to an internal memo obtained by NBC News, the Trump administration is also allowing ICE officials to quickly.
That inscription on the back of that officer's jacket, police ICE. I mean, that sounds like a leftist slogan, police ICE, like, have oversight.
Oh, yeah, true.
Of ICE. Maybe that's like a subtle protest.
Right.
But like, I'm not an expert on border security, but why is the military involved? Is this the military's job? When you go into basic training as a soldier, are you trained in immigration law enforcement? I don't think so. So what's up with this?
It's theater. That's what it is. It's like, it's just red meat for the base, or red meat for people who are can be kind of like whipped up into a frenzy against people coming into the country. Because again, it's such an easy scapegoat, and you don't have to look at all the things that the corporations are doing to screw people over. If you just blame it on people who are coming, in many cases, to flee governments that we've flee destabilized countries that we've helped destabilize, as we like to point out a lot. But yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, I don't think any rational person, even people who are tough on immigration, if they're remotely like policy driven as opposed to just hate driven, I think they probably think it's ridiculous to involve the military in this.
Going back to that inscription, I wonder if the initial thought was it should be ICE police.
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to get in trouble.
But maybe they thought if we say ICE police, people are going to think that's like an ice-based, like ice is in like, frosty, like
frosty, yeah, right.
So people would be confused thinking that there's like a police force specifically
on
for ice.
Yeah.
On ice, yeah, like
right.
On skates, like
exactly,
a police force on skates. So
or
they
skis.
just.
Oh no, you can't ski on ice. Forget it. It would have to be skates. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it'd have to be skates.
Yeah.
But maybe to avoid confusion, they inverted it. Anyway, fascinating questions that we explore here on Useful Idiots.
Deport migrants who were legally allowed into the country temporarily under the Biden administration. President Trump is already running into the constitutional limits of his executive authority. His plan to end automatic citizenship for children born on American soil, known as birthright citizenship, blocked by a federal judge.
Obviously, we'll appeal it. They put it before a certain judge in Seattle, I guess, right? And there's no surprises with that judge.
On a trip to disaster recovery areas in North Carolina and California, President Trump embraced his political opponents, but also floated the.
Look at him hugging Gavin Newsom there after repeatedly calling Gavin Newsom a loser and he sucks at his job. Then, of course, Trump sees him in person. He immediately folds, He immediately caves.
It's that gravelly voice, that gravelly Gavin voice.
That gravelly Gavin voice. Yes, it got him. It got him.
Yeah. I wonder what Gavin's. I bet you Gavin's just said something nice to Trump, like flattered Trump.
Hello, Mr. President.
Phone call.
Yeah.
Right, because that's really what turns him. Yeah.
Possibility of eliminating FEMA entirely, proposing the White House send disaster relief directly to the states.
I think, frankly, FEMA is not good. FEMA's turned out to be a disaster. I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away.
Well, on that point, where's the lie? I mean, for those of us who lived through Hurricane Katrina in 2006, 2005, that was a disaster, right?
Right. But the answer to that, I mean, this is, I think, another example of people like Trump just using any excuse that they can to chip away at any funding or cancel federal programs, right? Because yes, there were mistakes that FEMA made, but the main thing is that we should be funding FEMA more. It's not, the answer isn't to get rid of FEMA. We could be funding, obviously stop funding war would be good. You can invest that money into FEMA. And you can also invest into many other things that would help people during these recoveries. But they are doing terrible things. According to Newsweek, people have been getting kicked out of their temporary accommodations after their FEMA provided stay expired and have been facing eviction recently as a result. And 3,500 households were deemed ineligible. But the problem is, if you get rid of FEMA, what's going to happen to the people who are getting help right now? So I think it's reform FEMA.
Reform FEMA.
Yeah.
You heard it. You heard it here first. And of course, another answer, going back to Hurricane Katrina, is not appointing unqualified cronies to run FEMA. Yes. Yes.
People who may remember, it was Brownie during Katrina, and Bush famously said he was doing a hell of a job. His experience was like being the head of an Arabian horse association before that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Donald Trump won't be appointing any unqualified cronies. He doesn't do that.
Yeah.
No,
not at all.
no. So we're in good hands.
And by the way, I have to read what we are Democratic. Well, we're sometimes Democratic.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
We're never
No, we're
Democratic.
not.
Okay,
Yeah.
we appreciate your participation and sometimes let it filter through. And I got a quote, Everett Barbie, who says 390 likes. What gives, guys? 1350 watching. So at least we've trained Everett Barbie
to be a good snitch. Thank you, Everett, for being a good snitch. That's impressive.
I mean,
yes.
Yeah, we need snitches when you have criminals like these in the audience. So let's get those likes up, or else we're gonna. You know what we should start doing is, like, for every time we need to raise the likes, we should play 10 seconds of Brian Stelter, like torture until they like it. Okay.
Okay.
Now, a president does not have the power to shut down FEMA and would need Congress to give him the authority to remake or get rid of any agency. President Trump was also reminded of the Senate's guardrails on Friday night when Pete Hegseth became the second cabinet member in history to be confirmed on a tie-breaking vote. Hegseth was approved by the smallest margin for any confirmed defense secretary. 3 Republican senators, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitch McConnell, joined all Democrats to oppose him.
Just looking at that list of former defense secretaries, the previous 2 basically worked for the arms industry, Lloyd Austin and Mark Esper. They both were on the boards of major weapons companies. Pete Hegseth, to my knowledge, is not. So, look, I know there's a lot to knock about the guy, especially in his personal life. He's been accused by multiple women of, serious sexual crimes.
Yeah, including rape.
He also is apparently a Christian fundamentalist.
Definitely is that, and has a Crusaders tattoo, which is pretty popular among white nationalists these days. Yeah,
but at least breaks the streak of 2 consecutive defense secretaries who come from the weapons industry. So,
right,
maybe I
have a Christian Zionist, rapist, crusader. It's better. We like when those guys don't come from the arms industry.
Was disturbed about his comments on women in the military. I read the portion of his book in which he basically says that women should be moms and questions whether they should be in the military at all, much less in combat roles.
Senator McConnell called the role of defense secretary, quote, a daily test with staggering consequences for the security of the American people and our global interests, writing, Mr. Hegseth has failed as yet to demonstrate that he will pass this test. Hegseth was sworn in on Saturday and was pressed by NBC News.
Secretary Hegseth, why should women in the armed service trust you?
Guys, let me answer that for the new secretary. All people.
Why is JD
Vance? Seriously, yeah.
Why is JD Vance answering that on behalf of the new defense secretary? Like, why can't Pete Hegseth answer it for himself?
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Yeah,
he's a big abusive boy. He also was accused of physical abuse, like non-sexual abuse. So we should give him credit as being kind of like a Renaissance man when it comes to being abusive. Doesn't limit it to sexual abuse. And his wife actually wrote a letter about that. I mean, sorry, excuse me, Freudian slip. His mom wrote a letter about that. So.
Armed services should trust him because he looks out for them and he's going to fight for them. And he's going to make sure that we have the kind of military that we can all be proud in, that we can all be proud of. And that, again, when we send it to do a job, we do it well, we do it quickly, and then we get the hell out of it.
And joining me now is Republican Senator Lindsey.
All right. Well,
I mean, that's a kind of, I don't know if I'd be happy if I was Pete Hegseth. I'd feel a little emasculated by JD jumping in and answering a question for me. Yeah.
Well, let's hear more from JD Vance. He sat down with Face the Nation to give his first interview since taking office as vice president.